Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down the world famous utilization report as we get ready for week 7 and beyond. Appreciate you guys joining in as always. And yeah, let's get those fantasy lineups right ahead of another week of action. As always, we do have the one, the only Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland, joining me today. And Dwain, you know, you've got several beautiful, healthy, happy children. You've been happily married for a long time. But does anything in your life compare to taking Rashee Rice off that bench and putting him in the wide receiver one spot, baby? We're so back.
Well, my wife does listen occasionally, so no, Ian, it doesn't quite compare to getting married the day I got married, and actually just every second of being married. But after that, well, my kids listen too. So yeah, then the birth of the kids and having them. But then after that, I would go with Rashee Rice. I will be honest, I scrolled through several lineups last night. Because, you know, we stay up late doing some of the stuff that we do. And it was late enough that some of the stuff had flipped over. And so I was like, all right, let's get him in there. I'm not going to lie. I had multiple teams where Rashee Rice is already in the starting lineup. So I am with you.
Even more fun when those teams aren't 0-5 or 0-6, I should say, 1-5 or
there
whatever.
Were a few of those.
So again, yeah, right. So again, always, fantasy coming at you fast there. But yeah, guys, again, hopefully you do have Rashee Rice coming back. But if not, we got plenty of other options. Hopefully have you buy low, sell high, pick up off the waiver wire, all that jazz. So loaded show today. And accordingly, let's get into it, starting off with our DraftKings opening lines. Fairly quiet day of news in the NFL. I knock on wood, and I will probably have a ton of stuff happen during the middle of the show. But Dwain, we did have a double header of Monday Night Football, and accordingly, some utilization takeaways we want to get through. So first things first, we did have the Chicago Bears win their third straight game, getting rid of some of those Hail Mary demons with a 25-24 win over the Washington Commanders. Unfortunately, though, Dwain, did not seem like we saw much of a post-bye rookie bump for Luther Burden or Colson Loveland.
I mean, if you're looking for a silver lining, you did see a bump. It wasn't the bump that you were hoping for. It was a season high for Luther Burden in route participation, Ian, at 39%. The Bears actually ran less of their 12 personnel last night, ran more of 11 personnel, might have even ran some 10. I didn't go back to look, but it was a season high for Burden. So at least, you know, trending in the right direction and still looks pretty good. Like when he gets his opportunities. Yeah. So Luther Burden, you know, if you've got him stashed on your bench, you're playing in a sicko league, you're just going to keep him there. Obviously can't have him in the lineup yet. And then similar for Mr. Colson Loveland, even though they played more 12 personnel last night, it was the first time all year, Ian, where he ran more routes than Cole Kmet. You're probably thinking, wow, that's really good. Well, Cole Kmet had a 33% route participation, and Loveland had 45. So his route participation was right in line with where it had been, 48, 51. And then he had been hurt for a couple of games, but then in week 6, it was at 45%. So if there is a silver lining, it's that Cole Kmet played less. I did look at Perplexity before the show just to make sure. I guess I should have just asked producer Swing, since he is the Chicago fan here, whether it's the Cubs or the Bears, he's all in on his Chicago teams. So I didn't see anything though about a Cole Kmet injury. I didn't see anything during the game. I was flipping back and forth between both games because Amanda was watching them with me, and she does not like to watch 2 games at once. Ian, you got to focus on one. So we were flipping back and forth. So, hey, Cole Kmet with a little bit lesser role. So Colston Loveland just remains a stash play for now. But man, targets per route run on the season are only at 15% for the guy. So it's like, definitely we're hoping for more. I mean, we got Tyler Warren out here with a 23%. Come on, Colston Loveland.
Certainly, you know, that kind of ill-fated prophecy, if you will, of Dolan Kincaid and Dawson Knox, maybe being what was going to happen to Colson Loveland and Cole Kmet coming to fruition so far. So I'm with you on Luther Burden, though. Looks fantastic out there. And honestly, guys, if you do look at Bears pass catchers, the wide receivers, and the tight ends, Luther Burden has the highest team passer rating when targeted at 146. Dead last is Illuminated Zacchaeus. So hopefully Ben Johnson, smart guy, starts to see this with his own eyes as well and gets the rookie a bit more playing time. That said, Dwain, it really, I mean, the story of the game was the DeAndre Swift show. I was joking around with that meme where it's like the worst person you know makes a great point. That's how I feel like ball knowers are watching, you know, football when DeAndre Swift actually makes some great plays out there. So I understand the dude's vision isn't the best, and we do have a ton of evidence of him being pretty much anyone's idea of a below average running back. But not last night, Dwain, 175 total yards in a touchdown, 16 touches. Did not see Kyle Monangai, really anyone threatening this backfield. So no, I don't think he's going to be quite that efficient moving forward. But Bears offensive line did look good out there, and DeAndre Swift but really like he was even during the first 5 weeks of the season, still looking very much like a volume-based RB2.
Yeah, and I mean, theoretically, the Bears offense, it's better. It's probably not to like the level we hoped in the preseason, but it's still a better offense than what we had last year. And you're getting a guy that's playing in a full-time role. So you're going to get these blow-up games. I mean, in the last 2 games, he's given you 16 and 26 fantasy points in a PPR setting. So he's been the running back 20, the running back 6. And even before that, he's pretty much been a low-end running back 2, 27, 22, and 23. So you drafted him as a low-end running back 2, high-end running back 3. He's at least paying that off, and it does show you that you can still get these spike weeks. And it was nice to see him working as a receiver, Ian. Over these last 3 games, he's actually been a little bit more involved from a targets per route run, 23%, 25%, and then 19% last night. This is something that we did see him do early in his career. Not as much lately. Don't expect him to be like a massive cog in the pass game because they do have so many other weapons they want to feature. Other guys are trying to bring online. But yeah, he does still have some sweet passing down chops. And we saw him, I get it. Most of that was open field, but he made the guy miss that he needed to make miss, and then he took it to the house.
RB14 now in the season, PPR points per game, 1 spot ahead of Saquon Barkley. How the turns tables there. Otherwise, Dwayne, we did see Bill Crosby-Merritt really dominate this backfield. No Chris Rodriguez. He missed this one with the calf injury, but it was good to see Washington continue to go to the artist known as Bill because, again, he had a fumble at the end of the Chargers game and then also a quick one here where it was 2 fumbles in the midst of an 8-carry stretch. Didn't seem to impact his playing time overall, though.
Yeah, I haven't quite got to the Commanders, though the last team obviously on the list for my rest of season projections. I got a couple teams to go when I finish up here, but I was excited to get to Bill. And when I saw you put him in the show sheet notes, I went ahead and looked at it. But yeah, we did have Chris Rodriguez only playing 2% of the snaps last night. He dealt with an injury all week. So we'll have to see what does that do when he returns. But it was a very good night for Bill as far as utilization goes. He only gave you 5.8 fantasy points, but he had a larger role than he did the week before. In week 5, when he had his breakout game, he had 50% of the snaps. Last night, 67%. Ian, rushing attempts jumped from 61% to 71%. Route participation jumped from 38 to 46%. So basically, you had all his stuff together with what we had seen from Chris Rodriguez before, and that's what you had with Bill last night. And I do think the biggest positive is the fact that, with the 2 fumbles, one of them wasn't really his fault. Jaden Daniels, wet ball or whatever, didn't quite get it to him on that second one, that they did not go away from him. Only gave you 5.8 fantasy points, like I said, but still had a really strong night as far as the underlying utilization goes. So we'll see where it goes. I'll probably keep him pretty close to where I had him before with hope, assuming that Chris Rodriguez comes back. But it wouldn't necessarily surprise me with how efficient he's been. Like if they do just decide to go ahead and turn over the backfield and we see more of this moving forward. If we did, man, if we saw this, if this wasn't due to Chris Rodriguez being unhealthy last week, and we saw this type of utilization, I would be moving him up. He would be moving up into that mid-range running back 2 status, and then potentially he could be knocking on the door of running back 1 if he did that 2 weeks in a row, even though he didn't score the fantasy points.
Certainly set up well. Next Sunday, when the Commanders travel to the Coors Field, basically, of fantasy football at this point against the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry World. Meanwhile, we got the Bears looking for their 4th straight victory at home against the Saints. So get ready for those 2. We did have a second, though, game, Dwayne. We actually saw the Falcons take down the Buffalo Bills, handing them their 2nd straight loss, 24-14. Really just 2 clear-cut stars of the evening. Bijan Robinson racked up 238 total yards on 25 touches. And with his 81-yard touchdown run, people, that was the first run of Bijan's professional career that actually went longer than 40 yards, which is just crazy to think about for someone as explosive as he is. So he caught some passes that went longer before. So, I'm Drake and joshing around just a little bit. But yeah, Bijan absolutely balling, as is Drake London, Dwayne. 10 catches on 16 targets for 158 yards and a touchdown. Was about 3 feet away from having a second touchdown just before halftime. Unfortunately, stepped just out of bounds. But yeah, man, Falcons are force-feeding the football to Bijan and Drake London. If you have them in fantasy, you're loving it.
Yeah, I mean, 28% target share last night for Bijan. He's sitting at a 20% on the year. And he's just a massive part of their passing attack. And because they're giving him so much work through the air, they are letting Tyler Algier come in and get some carries as well. But you can't really blame him. Algier's looked good on his work as well. We're going to talk about another backfield in a second for the Bills where I don't feel the same way, but I don't necessarily blame the Falcons for letting Algier get some work. Sure, we love more from Bijan in fantasy, but still, I mean, he's averaging 24.8 fantasy points per game. Ian is not his utilization score, which is on a scale of 0 to 100 is a 94. So all of his comps have been top 3 running backs for the season, and that's where Bijan is sitting right now. You mentioned Drake London, man, and really it does make you wonder, that early, I can't remember if it was the first game. I do believe it was the first game of the year when he landed awkwardly on the shoulder in the end zone. if he's just now really getting back from that, because the last two games, 38 and 48% target shares. Week 1, he had 36% whenever he hurt that shoulder. So in those games where we know that he's been healthy, he's giving you 13.5, 25, and 31.8 fantasy points. He's averaging 17.3 on the year, has a utilization score of an 85 now, and that's counting 2 duds in the middle where the shoulder may have been a factor. So we can't necessarily say it's all that. This could just be the way it goes, right? You get these big games, you get some games, but even in his bad games, he's giving you 19 and 18% target shares. So that's really his floor. So yeah, Drake London looking like a solid wide receiver 1 the rest of the way.
Darnell Mooney being out helped, but he might be out for longer, guys. I mean, even coming out of the bye, couldn't even get a single limited practice in as he continues to deal with that hamstring injury. So a banged up 49ers defense next on tap for the Falcons. And then the Dolphins after that, wheels up for Drake London. And guys, if you do need a QB streamer, I do think Michael Penix is a pretty good option, all things considered. Finally, Dwayne, be a little bit cooler if James Cook got involved in the passing game. Again, not going to be, those guys just completely ripping the Bills. Obviously, they know a thing or two about scoring a lot of points. And James Cook, more weeks than not, has been pretty awesome. But 120 straight minutes of football, Dwayne, without a single reception for James Cook, that's confusing to me.
Yeah, to me as well, just because James Cook is really a good receiver out of the backfield. Yeah, people will bury him for some of the drops, and he's had some critical ones, but they've also been down the field doing things that a lot of other running backs can't do, Ian, beating second-level defenders and things like that. So as you move down the field, the catching the ball does become harder. Now, I know some of those were wide open for James Cook, and I know the Bills Mafia, if you guys are listening to this, I know that kind of sticks in your memory bank, but still a player that what really confused me the most, Ian, I'm fine with not trying to completely load up James Cook. I get it. You're trying to protect him some, but on the 2 drives before the final drive, when they could have gone down to tie the game, James Cook was barely on the field. And so that's the thing. It's like first and second down, do you really need to have Ray Davis out there for one of those plays? Then Ty Johnson was out there for a couple of the early down plays. So it just feels a little bit strict to me for a play caller like Joe Brady to say, okay, checks down, looks at his notes. He's like, oh, my 2-minute back is Ty Johnson. And he forgets that he has James Cook. Give the guy a little bit of playing time whenever you're trying. Look, your other weapons have not done anything all night. The only player that's looked good besides Josh Allen, and Josh Palmer had some nice plays early before he got hurt, was really James Cook. So why not get him on the field? And you could tell he was not happy on the sideline. So hoping that squeaky wheel gets some grease as we move forward. But man, you mentioned it. That was by far, he tied for his lowest route participation of the season, and it was at 31%. His other low was also in their loss, guys. So in these games where the Bills do get behind, and I do think their defense is a little bit overrated when you just look at the personnel and what they have. They have a good scheme and everything. They're a smart defense, but you saw what an offense with really good playmakers in multiple spots could do to them last night with the Falcons. So there is a little bit of risk now moving forward with James Cook because we've seen these 2 game scripts really limit him. Now, in the other one, he scored 2 rushing touchdowns, so you're fine. He scored 26.5 fantasy points, but he's gone 2 weeks without a rushing touchdown. I will say he still dominated the backfield. 89% of the rushing attempts went to James Cook. They're just not choosing to throw the ball to him. They're going to Ty Johnson instead.
Bills will look to end this mini skid in week 8 against the Panthers. They do have a week 7 bye along with the Ravens to figure things out in the meantime. So good stuff there, Mr. Dwayne. Now let's get into the utilization report. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. But first, a quick shout out to our friends at DraftKings because I have teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you the ultimate way to tip off this NBA season. Right now, new customers who bet just $5 will get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins, plus 3 months of NBA League Pass on us. That's right, new customers bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins, plus 3 months of NBA League Pass on us. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Stack your bonus bets on same-game parlays, player props, moneyline spreads, and more, or stay in the action with live betting that brings every play to life. So here's your play. Download DraftKings Sportsbook, sign up with promo code FANTASYLIFE, bet just $5 and get 3 months of League Pass on us and $300 more if your bet wins, paid out in bonus bets. Thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook for sponsoring this. Let's make this NBA season one to remember. If you're hearing that funky jingle, that means it's time to talk about the utilization report presented by DraftKings. And Dwayne, got some big RB movement that we want to talk about at the top. First up, the Chargers backfield. Again, Martin Hampton on IR. And as we heard this weekend, expecting to miss even more than the 4-game requirement. So not going to have Hampton for a while, meaning it sure looks a lot like Kamani Vidal is a new RB1 in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Kamani Vidal looked really good in this game. Now, it's a super small sample. We saw this with Michael Carter last week. We've had other guys this season where we have to react to a one-game sample. But guess what? We had before this, guys, was a 2-drive sample. And we were trying to react to that. So we have a little more data than what we had before. But it was a massive win for Kamani Vidal in the box score with 22.8 fantasy points, but also the underlying utilization. He outsnapped Hassan Haskins 67% to 31%, rushing attempts 72% to 24%, and route participation over doubled him up 54% to 21%. Naheem Hines did sneak in there for 3% of the routes. And targets per route run, this is a guy that was a good receiver out of the backfield in college. We saw flashes of it last year, but it just never really came to fruition. We would see it in spurts. He had 19% targets per route run. And the big thing, Ian, is just the underlying data here. 18 rushing attempts and 4 targets. So 22 opportunities in an offense that, yeah, it's been a little bit down with the offensive linemen banged up, but as they get healthy, and we could have Kamani Vidal as an option for the next 5 games. So it's tough because we don't want to freak out. These teams do hot hand stuff. Player makes a mistake and all of a sudden the other guy gets a bigger workload. There's matchups. There's different things that the coaches are considering. But still, it was just really tough for me as I sat there and thought about it and looked at it to not move Vidal at least up to low end running back 2 territory. I know some folks are moving him in even higher than that. It's tough because of the lessons that, and it's not just this year. We see it every year with these one-game samples. Right. They can be wrong, but and Vidal just looked way better than Haskins. And I mean, Haskins, it's not like he's had a ton of run in his career, but he's just kind of been the same guy, just more of a plotter. I get it. He could probably give you some tough yards inside, get down inside the 5-yard line. He could poach some touchdowns and do things like that. But man, 6.5 yards per carry for Vidal this season, 2.5 for Haskins. Yards after contact, 3.4 for Vidal versus 2.9 for Haskins. And then the 10-plus yard rushing attempts, 23% of his carries for Vidal have gone 10-plus yards. So just, the better all-round player, in my opinion, and I just think we have to lean into it. If he gets the same kind of workload again, we will be treating him as a mid-range to high-end running back too, depending on how many teams are on bye until we get Omari and Hampton back.
It is notable we did not see a rush attempt inside the 5-yard line. I would be expecting those to go to Haskins. And give credit to the Michigan man for throwing, again, 2 awesome blocks on that, what wound up being game-winning, completion to Lab McConkey. But yeah, big-time win here for Kamani Vidal. I'm with you, Dwain. He is my RB21 here ahead of next week. So firmly in that low-end RB2 conversation. Unfortunately, I have checked the NFL regulations and rules, and the Chargers are not allowed to play the Dolphins every single week. So I wouldn't expect the sledding to be that easy moving forward. We also have to keep in mind that with the trade deadline coming up, per Josina Anderson, the Chargers are making some preliminary calls for running backs. That said, Dwain, again, I don't want to completely just, ruin any thoughts of getting Vidal because there could be a trade out there. For all we know, they add someone to compete with Naeem Hines versus, actually Vidal at the top of the depth chart. So as things stand, low-end RB2, you said it, though, we're looking more so at a probable 5-game stretch, though, as a lead back. So for that reason, probably someone to go after on the waiver wire, but maybe not blow every last dollar you have.
Yeah, I mean, he's available still in 70% of Yahoo leagues. So that number will be lower, come Wednesday. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that he really should be rostered in most formats. If you play in an 8-team league and it's a small roster, I get it. You probably don't have room for Vidal. But once you get to 10 teamers, or you're especially if you're in a 10-teamer where you guys are rostering 18 players, maybe you got 2 IR spots, that kind of thing, Vidal really does need to be rostered. If you go larger than that, he's a must roster at that point. So I would be willing to be a little bit aggressive because there's also there's also a decent chance that whoever the Chargers do trade for, are they really wanting to take on salary cap? I don't think they're going to trade for an Alvin Kamara. And the Saints are saying they're keeping Alvin Kamara, but that's what we always hear, right? There's the positioning, in the media to try to, maintain your leverage in a trade. But I just, I don't know. A lot of these running backs you hear throwing around, they've got decent contracts. And I mean, they still have Omari and Hampton, who's a young player. Do you really want to tie up, 2 or 3 years of a contract and a trade? I think there's a really good chance that Vidal is the lead back. And he probably gave them a little bit more confidence seeing him do what he did this weekend.
Again, we'll see what happens. God forbid they get someone like Breece Hall or Jim Harbaugh's former BFF, Blake Corum. Then maybe we'd have to be changing our thoughts on the matter. But again, that's just pure speculation, though. Who knows? For now, Kamani Vidal sitting in the driver's seat, and accordingly looking like a pretty good play, at least in week 7. But yeah, likely beyond. Also, Dwayne, we do have a rookie running back absolutely balling out for the New York Football Giants, Cam Skattebo. He's only averaging 4.1 yards per carry, but for my money's worth, it is the most entertaining 4.1 yards per carry in the league, set up against the Broncos and Eagles over these next few weeks. So yes, it was the first game back for Tyrone Tracy coming back from that shoulder injury. He could get more involved in the future, but at least for 1 week, Dwayne, this very much did remain Skattebo's backfield.
Yeah, so I mean, out of one small sample frying pan into the next, we jump because it's a 1-game sample back for Tracy. And to your point, they could be ramping him up. So I was still a little bit conservative with Skattebo, but I definitely bumped him up in the rest of season projections. More willing to lean into him, and also just Ian, just watching the way he is with the team, the way the coaches talk about him, like the teammates seem to love him. He just brings energy.
I love him.
I could just see I love him too. I don't know how long he can run the way he does, and continue to survive, but he definitely doles out a lot of punishment. Great tweet by you from Batman with "They expect one of us and the Wreckage Brother." I'm not going to do my Bane voice because I'm not ready for it, but that was a great tweet. So yeah, like looking at Skattebo, like his routes did drop down to 48% this game, and he had been over the 60% mark the 2 previous games. But I really dug into it, Ian, and it wasn't because of Tracy returning. He had a 24% route participation, which was basically what Devin Singletary had in the games before this. So he stepped into the Devin Singletary role. What happened was they were actually leading, and so they were just keeping their running backs, period, did not run as many routes per drop back because they were trying to protect Jackson Dart, not turn the football over and win the game. So it was really due to that. So when I first saw that, I was like, oh, okay, Tracy probably stepped into more of a passing down role, but it wasn't the case. So just looking at it, like you mentioned, it's hard to know for sure what Tyrone Tracy will do. He was a good player last year, so I wouldn't doubt if he does move a little more upward like over these coming games. But I think we can still see Skattebo around 60% of the snaps, man. And I think he's going to get the work inside the 5-yard line. He's already shown that he can hang out there and pass pro. He's had a couple mistakes this year, but he's very capable. And he's a guy that they like to use in the 2-minute offense as well. So he really just checks all the boxes. Even if he's only averaging 4.1 yards per carry, we like the guys that get the ball inside the 5 and that they can catch passes, Ian. And with Malik Neighbors out, you're still going to see games where Skattebo is probably going to get 5 or 6 targets, even if you have Tyrone Tracy getting 3 or 4. So I upgraded him again to mid-range running back 2. We had slightly bumped him down last week, but if he holds on to this role for another week with Tyrone Tracy back, we'll have to consider bumping him up a little bit more again. A little bit of concern about the Giants offense. They are looking better with Jackson Dart, but we realize they still don't have, the pass catchers to really like put up a lot of points on a week-to-week basis. So the touchdown upside, even though he gets the carries inside the 5, like I don't know how high like we can push it. Like I can see him scoring 10 rushing touchdowns, but it wouldn't surprise me if he scored he scored 3 this weekend. So I mean,
good start.
I was about to say 8. I mean, so that will only be 5 left. I think I had him at like 9.5 in the projections the rest of the way. So yeah, he's a mid-range running back too, and we'll just have to continue to monitor it as Tyrone Tracy gets healthier.
Week 7 ranks, I do have Skattebo as my RB13, just ahead of guys like Rashad White, Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, just behind Quinshon Judkins, Javonte Williams, and Saquon Barkley. So as always, you guys check out my rankings column and the utilization report for free over at fantasylife.com if you're still into, reading words in the year 2025. We do salute you if so and appreciate it. Dwayne, one more running back to go through. This one is not as happy because it is the fact that Travion Henderson cannot and will not get the football in New England. Really did seem like it was still the Ramondre Stevenson show with Antonio Gibson done for the year. And as much as we would love to sit here and say, why God did we draft so much Travion Henderson in August? Actually, I am still saying that. But as much as we would love to complain about that, Dwayne, the rookie needs to make more out of his touches, man. We're talking about Travion being 32nd in yards per carry, 31st in yards per reception among 43 qualified running backs. So yeah, let's face it, Ramondre Stevenson hasn't been a ton better, but unfortunately, man, just not going Henderson's way through 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's one of those things when I look at some of our teams, Ian, I'm like, oh my God, this team has that guy. How is this team, 4-2 instead of 6-0? And then I look down on the bench, I'm like, oh, we drafted TreVeyon Henderson on this team, and so we probably started him the first 2 weeks. What is pain? Pain is TreVeyon Henderson in the year 2025, Ian. In this first game without Antonio Gibson, where we thought we might get more of a two-way split between the backs, 71% of the snaps went to Ramondre. Only 29% to TreVeyon Henderson. Now, the opportunities were closer. 54% to 38% was the lead for Stevenson versus Henderson in the rushing attempt department. You guys can see here on the screen, route participation. That was the real bummer, Ian. Like, that's kind of the role that TreVeyon has had, but 19% routes and 52% to Stevenson. So they're just not trusting him on pass downs right now. 33% targets per route run. So when he's out there, like, 1 out of 3 plays they're getting designed for Henderson. He's sitting at a 25% targets per route run on the season. So I think he's still going to get targets, but we're still in a holding pattern right now. And the question is just like, how long will it take? There's a chance that it's just not this year, Ian. I mean, it's in the range of outcomes. I think the positive thing for him, and I posted this in the article, guys, is when we look at running back performances for the first 6 weeks of the season versus the rest of the year, especially these round 2 running backs. Round 3 running backs are similar, round 4, but these round 2 backs like TreVeyon, they see a 31% increase in their fantasy points per game over the rest of the season versus right now, what they had done so far. So it's pretty typical to see a running back that got drafted in round 2 kind of be a little buried, come on more towards the end of the year. But man, I would sure just like to see anything that's like making me think, it clearly should be Henderson over Stevenson. Yards per carry on the year, Henderson 3.8, Stevenson 3.7. Yards after contact, Henderson 2.4, Ian. The league average 2.9, Stevenson's at a 3. 10-plus yard carries. Oh, that's for sure where Henderson's going to shine, right? No, only 9%. The league average is 9.5. Stevenson's right there with him at 8. Missed tackles forced per attempt. The league average is 17%. TreVeyon's at 13%, man. And Stevenson's at 29% and has actually been good in that area for his career. And then the targets per route run, that does still lean to Hendo. Like I said, he's sitting at 24% versus Stevenson at 18%. So don't you can't give up on him, guys. You're probably not going to drop him anyway because you did spend around 4 or 5 pick depending on where you're drafting. If you're drafting in the rooms Ian and I were in, we had to draft him in round 3, so it even hurts that much more. But I would just say he's a hold right now. Stevenson's a low end running back. That's the sad part, Ian. Even with all this work, like, we can't get that excited about Ramondre Stevenson. And so there's definitely, though, if he hangs on to that kind of role, he's going to have better days in the future than 1.8 fantasy points is what you got this last week. But it's not like I see this data and I'm rushing to put Stevenson in my lineups either.
You'd like to think Stevenson could get more going in the Mike Vrabel revenge game this Sunday here against the Tennessee Titans. But I'm with you, man. The answer right now has pretty much been no. Thought Stevenson will be able to break out more. Offensive line hasn't done them a ton of favors. This is one of just 9 teams averaging less than 1 yard before contact per carry. But, dude, just, again, the fact that we haven't seen even 1 or 2 big plays from Henderson, that's the wild part, because I've heard people give the, honestly, like, good rational statement of like, hey, at Ohio State, they brought in Judkins last year. Like, they realized Henderson was wearing down. We shouldn't have believed that he was going to have this massive workload. And the thing was, Dwayne, I don't think we were sitting there in August. Actually, I know we weren't saying like, oh, he's going to be getting 20 carries per game and taking over the backfield. We were thinking 10 or 12 and all the pass down work. And I guess that's really been the spot that has been hurt on the season now. Just 18 targets for Henderson, 15 for Stevenson. I thought that gap was going to be wider. There's been some pass protection problems for Henderson, which again were very surprising. Just a big fat L so far. Basically drafted a more expensive Bashaw Tootin.
Yeah, it's the big plays and a smaller role in the passing game than we anticipated. We actually had Ramondre Stevenson in our preseason projections ranked to have more carries, more of the rushing attempts than we did for TreVeyon Henderson. But we just thought that Henderson would make the big plays when he had his opportunities, and we thought that he might be able to be more like we always said Alvin Kamara was too high of a comp, but similar to like that rookie year where you were able to live more on the big plays. And then eventually as the season went on, he might have a chance to really take over more work as he proved to be the better running back. Just none of those things have come to fruition. So first things first, TreVeyon's got to play better, Ian. Like, that's step number 1. Like, TreVeyon, he has to play better to unlock more playing time. And even if he does that, That doesn't always guarantee it. I will say, though, the rookie data is pretty strong that these guys do grow their role as the season goes on. So that's your silver lining today for Trevion Henderson, and hopefully it does not get completely ripped from our cold, dead hands this weekend, and we have another downgrade for him. But right now, he's a running back 4 that you're just stashing.
I sure hope we see a bump up, Dwayne, because you sent a pretty funny, joking tweet on August 26th saying where you and me were heading if Henderson didn't work out this year, and it was the bankruptcy, divorce, and liquor stores. Right now, I might want to start looking up directions for those. So again, good thing America loves a comeback, and good thing America loves some DraftKings Sportsbook. Again, invite you guys to go ahead and download DraftKings Sportsbook. Sign up with the promo code Fantasy Life. Bet just $5 and then get 3 months of League Pass on us and $300 more if your bet wins, paid and bonus bets. Let's turn those frowns upside down and talk about Brian Thomas Jr., Dwayne, showing signs of life in Fantasyland. Yeah, last week was the first time, we were getting the touchdown, the true boom performance. Would have been a lot cooler if Travis Hunter knew how to line up on sides with that 54-yard nullified touchdown. But man, even over the last few weeks before that, really have seen T-Law and BTJ find some new chemistry, which is good that T-Law finally has chemistry with his wide receiver 1. How about that, Dwayne?
Yeah, and so I had Matt Harmon on talk data to me last Friday. You guys can check that episode out. Still a lot of great points from Matt that are applicable to a lot of these. We talked about 5 different wide receivers, Brian Thomas Jr. being one of them. And he talked about the fact that they had really moved Brian Thomas Jr. back into the role that he played last year. So they had tried moving him to the role that they had Mike Evans play in Liam Cohen's offense, which was a more diverse route tree, doing a lot of different things. And so it looks like they've really simplified the game plan for BTJ. And that Trevor Lawrence trusts him more in that role. We had 9 catchable targets, Ian, this weekend for Brian Thomas Jr. That by far was as high on the season. His previous high had been 6. So it does look like we had a little bit more chemistry between the two. Again, one really good data point, but what Matt had seen on the film, and you had actually been talking about in a few tweets for the last week or so as well, is just a little bit of a different role, and that can lead to more trust. Ultimately, I'd like to see him play the Mike Evans role, Ian, because that's how you could go off and be a high-end wide receiver 1. But we'll take what we can get. I just did the rest of season projections on the Jaguars about an hour or so before we jumped on the show. And I looked at Brian Thomas Jr., where he ended up after I made all the adjustments, and he was sitting at wide receiver 18. So I get it, guys. You drafted him as a top 8, top 9 wide receiver. He's not paying that off for you. But at least we're probably looking at a player we feel pretty good about starting every week moving forward. And at least we saw the ceiling. It was a season high utilization score of 88 with 23 fantasy points. You heard Ian talk about the offsides penalty by Travis Hunter that cost him another 11. This could have been 34 fantasy points on the weekend for BTJ. So nice to see the big plays coming through. I also ran him through the utilization model looking back to 2020, whenever we have the data back to on the model. And 50% of the time, those wide receivers went on to be a wide receiver 2, so between wide receiver 13 and wide receiver 24, and 7% of the time they still managed to squeak out a top 12 finish for the rest of the season, Ian. So there is hope. Obviously, you only heard 50% of the range there, so there is still a chance that we have more of a wide receiver 3 here, but I do have him in the rest of season projections as a mid-range to low-end wide receiver 2. If we continue to see good things, we'll bump him up again.
I have him ranked right there ahead of his matchup with the Rams this weekend. He's my wide receiver 17 on the week. Mr. Wet Blanket himself, though, Matthew Freedman, all the way up there at wide receiver 12. So there is still hope, everyone, for the wide receiver booms that you drafted BTJ to hopefully get. Another pass catcher we want to talk about. Speaking of Mike Evans, Dwayne, we are hopeful to see him back in action this week. I know the Buccaneers could use him. And with 4 wide receivers, all unfortunately sidelined for the moment with injuries. So again, haven't gotten complete confirmation here, but the Bucs are hopeful that Evans can at least return to practice, presumably setting up this Sunday. So again, Dwayne, didn't exactly see Evans balling out to start the year. I will say, 3 straight matchups against very, very tough cornerbacks in AJ Terrell, Derek Stingley, and Sauce. So God forbid Evans can get right by Monday night, has an extra day to do so. It's a line secondary, man, that is down 5 of their top 6 cornerbacks, looking at who they were expecting to trot out there in August. So come on, Mike, get that hamstring right, because we need you right now.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add about Evans, even though he wasn't scoring the fantasy points, to your point, like he had 11.3 fantasy points per game, so he wasn't doing what you drafted him to do, but the underlying utilization was still there. He had a 29% target share, which was the team lead. It was well above Emeka Egbuka before he got hurt, and he had a 76 utilization score, which was tied with Egbuka. So you just look historically at the comps for that utilization score, even if like he doesn't like go bananas, they've averaged 15 fantasy points per game, but it's also Mike Evans. And we've seen him find himself this kind of situation before, Ian. Last year, whenever he found himself as the focal point of the offense from week 12, when he got back from injury through the wild card game, when they did not have Chris Godwin, obviously Emeka Egbuka was not on the team yet, he had 20.9 fantasy points per game. Obviously, this week, we've got to be a little bit more conservative with him just because of the fact that but I would say for Mr. Mike Evans, like he is moving back into that wide receiver 2 territory, and he offers wide receiver 1 upside. And he's a guy that, right now in trades, like I looked at some, they're not terrible. Like you could go get Mike Evans. It might not be great in this first week back, but I think we have good things ahead for Mike. I won't be surprised at all, Ian, if he averages 15 to 17 fantasy points the rest of the way. And we talk about him being more of a borderline wide receiver 2. We do not know what's going to happen with Chris Godwin. I was researching that before the show. We don't have any really good sound bites on it. And even when we get them from this coaching staff, like how much can we really trust it? So I'm really leaning into Egbuka and Mike Evans being the clear top 2 dogs in this offense the rest of the way.
Honestly, wouldn't be too surprised if Godwin and even Jalen McMillan don't play the rest of the season. I don't know. Maybe Godwin could be back sooner rather than later. Again, just a lot of uncertainty there. Emeka Egbuka seems like he's missing probably a few weeks with that hamstring issue. So again, certainly could use Mike out there doing normal Mike Evans things. Last one I want to talk about, Dwain, is Packers tight end 1 Tucker Kraft, someone that we were hoping to be able to have in the ever-shrinking tight end circle of trust. But as great as Tucker Kraft is in real life, and believe me, people, he is amazing. He actually is the only player this year with at least 20 targets and a perfect 58.3 passer rating when targeted. The problem is, Dwayne, we need more targets.
Yeah, and with Tucker Kraft, this really comes down to the eye of the beholder, Ian. Like we know that he suffered that knee injury in practice heading into week 3, and he's not been the same player since then. And so when you look at him before that, he had a utilization score of 82, where 77% of his comps had gone on to be top 6 tight ends in a season. So he was averaging 12.9 fantasy point, or he's averaging 12.9 fantasy points, but his comps had averaged over 15. So if you think that it's due to the injury, like this is a time to go buy Tucker Kraft. But there's also scenario 2, which is the fact that last year Tucker Kraft did the stuff after the catch with the ball. He was pretty well used down inside the 10-yard line as well, but he had a 61 utilization score, which really matches his 57 over the last 3 games when we're looking at potentially the injury hindering his performance. So it's hard to say which way it's going to go, but I provide these scenarios so that you guys can really make the call. Obviously, when you put on your, watching football glasses, like it's really nice to watch Tucker Kraft. Like he's very easy on the eyes, as my dad would say, Ian. And so I want to lean into Tucker Kraft still being a really good player. I did my rest of season projections this morning on the Green Bay Packers. He still came in as tight end 7. Now that he was up to tight end 4, guys. So I did have to knock him down a little bit just because the targets per route run are down. He's not getting the targets he was getting early in the year. So if you're looking to me for the answer on Tucker Kraft, that's where I'm putting him. But it wouldn't surprise me if he finished closer to tight end 12, and it wouldn't surprise me if he finished closer to tight end 3. I think both are in the range of outcomes. If it is due to the injury, we would expect him to get healthier as the season goes, probably return to what we saw earlier in the season. But it is an offense that likes to spread the ball around, and they're only going to be getting more healthy. Ian, we could see Christian Watson back this week. We can get Jaden Reed back in the next 3 games. So you draft Matthew Golden. There's a lot of guys they're trying to get the ball to here.
And look, Tucker Kraft is our consensus tight end 5. He's not leaving your starting lineup. He's not leaving the tight end 1 ranks anytime soon. But again, that circle of trust is Tyler Warren, it's Trey McBride, it's Jake Ferguson a little bit closer to the edge. And after that, right now, as long as George Kittle and Brock Bowers remain sidelined, Dwayne, that really is all that. Again, not saying you can't be happy about guys like Sam Laporta and Dallas Goedert and, of course, Tucker Kraft. But again, certainly would be a lot cooler if we had a few more targets to work with. So good stuff there. But speaking of that utilization score, we got some risers and fallers to go through. First, a quick word to our friends over at Xfinity. If you call yourself a sports fan, you got to have Xfinity. All the games all in one place. What you get when you watch sports with Xfinity. You get the Sports Zone, every pro football game, and over 1,000 college games, highlights, and alerts all in one place. Also, the multi-view feature, which I would say, Dwain, your family needs, being on 4 at once. Also note the Xfinity Fan View, live scores, odds, and stats all in one place, personalized to you on enhanced 4K, guys. Xfinity enhanced 4K, simply stunning viewing. Also, the voice remote. All you have to do is say football, and you can see all this and more. Imagine all your football all in one place. Easy. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Note that restrictions do apply to new residential customers only. Taxes and fees are extra and subject to change. Time for some utilization score movers, which, again, to reiterate, Dwain, if I were you, I'd be screaming this every single time I brought up the utilization score. More predictable for future fantasy points than actual fantasy points. Again, guys, cannot stress enough how useful this can be to monitor throughout the season. So let's kick things off with pretty much everyone was forced to spend a late round one, if maybe best case, pick on Raiders rookie RB Ashton Jeanty, who, yes, Dwain had a slow start, but sure seems to be doing his thing here lately.
Yeah, and so we've got a pair of players for each position. We've got running backs, then we'll hit receivers, then we'll hit tight ends. And just so you guys know how this works, it's looking at how much their season-long utilization score moved over the last 4 games. So what was their utilization score for the season heading into week 3? And then what does it look like coming out of week 6? And if we look at Ashton Jeanty for the Raiders, he has improved his utilization score from a 66 to an 80. And it doesn't even tell the full story, Ian, because we had the blowout loss 2 weeks ago where they just pulled Jeanty off the field. He didn't play in the fourth quarter of that game. And so he has a 92 utilization score over the last 3 games with the 3 games where he played the full contest. He has a utilization score of 92 with 22 fantasy points per game. So Jeanty is locked into that low-end running back 1 territory, but he offers high-end running back 1 upside on any slate. The guy that's trending down at the running back spot, unfortunately, is Jaylen Warren. This one's a little tricky because Jaylen Warren didn't play a couple of games, so there wasn't a lot of room for his utilization score to stabilize more, but it was at a 78 4 weeks ago, and now it's at a 71. And in the first game back from the bye, we did see a reintegration of Caleb Johnson into the backfield, Ian, and that really did hurt Warren. So in that first game back from the bye, 46% rush share for Jaylen Warren, and that was a season low for him. It was also Kenneth Gainwell getting knocked down to 25%. So when you look at the role in the pass game coming down a little bit because Gainwell's going to do his thing there, Jaylen Warren was a guy, man, that was really trending positively for a couple weeks, got the injury bug, then the bye week hits. Sometimes it's just unfortunate how these things play out. I think, Warren doesn't get hurt, he probably holds on to the role, Ian, and he's doing his thing. But this is how football goes. You got to be available to stay on the field. You got to be out there to put the reps down so the coaches continue to trust you. So right now we do have Jaylen Warren dropping down to mid-range running back 3 territory, which is sad because I thought we were finally getting the Jaylen Warren experience we've been waiting on for 3 years. He was a low-end running back 2 before.
Obviously, knife land particularly easy for either running back this season in terms of rushing yards before contact per carry. We have the Browns, Raiders, and the Steelers down there in the bottom 3. But in Jeanty's case, he's on pace for 337 touches, so it's all good at the end of the day. Only CMC, Josh Jacobs, and Jonathan Taylor currently pacing for more. That said, Dwain, moving on to some wide receivers. Utilization score up for Mr. George Pickens, one of only 4 wide receivers this season averaging north points per game. Love to see it.
Yeah, man, George Pickens, his utilization score has climbed from a 67 to an 83 since week 3. Now, the absence of CeeDee Lamb is obviously a component of this, and we would expect Lamb to step back into a role where he's getting a lot of targets. But the nice thing here for George Pickens is he's been forced to learn more spots in the offense with CeeDee Lamb out. In fact, this last week, he had a season-high 20% of his reps come from the slot. So it's nice to see that, and I think that's a thing that bodes well for him the rest of the way. We also have the Cowboys defense who can't stop anyone. And we have Dak Prescott playing completely out of his mind. So I don't think that we're going to see the 26.3 fantasy points per game that we've gotten from Pickens without CeeDee Lamb. That would be really wild. But I do think the Cowboys, and you've brought this up before, Ian, they're really this year's version of last year's Bengals. The 2024 Bengals, whenever you had T. Higgins really performing like a borderline wide receiver 1 in the games where he was healthy. And that's really where Pickens is at right now. Now, we do have a tight end here in Ferguson who's better than the tight ends we had in Cincinnati. So I've got Pickens as a mid-range wide receiver 2 the rest of the way with CD Lamb back. And then on the other side, we do have a faller at wide receiver with Keenan Allen. His utilization score has fallen from 85 to 72 over the last 4 games. His role hasn't really changed that much, so I won't be surprised if he bounces back some here, but it does create a situation, and we've talked about this. It's happened to Ladd McConkey already this year. We don't know if it can happen to Quentin Johnson. He's the Superman so far. He did miss this last game due to an injury, but it's an offense where when you have so many mouths to feed, Ian, and we have Aronde Gadsden now stepping into a larger role, and he's catching balls, one of these players is going to get squeezed every week. And so we just don't know which one it's going to be. That's going to add some volatility. That overall is going to bring the utilization score down for Keenan Allen. So he's a borderline wide receiver 2, was a guy we really had locked into that mid-range wide receiver 2 territory over the first 5 games of the season. So even if you want to look at him more as a high-end wide receiver 3, I wouldn't be surprised to see him show up in that range in the ranks this week. And I think that's also fair. I will say his comparisons have averaged 14 fantasy points per game. So if you go back in PPR formats, if you go back to 2011, and you look at that number, Ian, that has been a mid-range wide receiver 2. And that's what the utilization score says as well. It's actually slightly below that at a low-end wide receiver 2. So it's not a situation where you have to completely bail on Keenan, but there is some volatility with so many mouths to feed for the Chargers.
60 plus yards and a touchdown in each of those first 3 weeks for Keenan. Unfortunately, hasn't found the end zone even once since, also averaging just a hair over 40 yards per game. So hopefully, again, can get going if QJ is going to be out. Would like to think going to have plenty of targets on his plate. That said, Dwain, a tight end where we're seeing the utilization score going up. As ugly as week 6 was, life is looking better ahead for Mr. Mason Taylor.
Yeah, Mason Taylor, and we also have Garrett Wilson, who's potentially going to miss a couple of games here. So when you look at Taylor, he has pushed his utilization score from a 37 to a 60 in the last 4 weeks. He was dealing with a nasty high ankle sprain that he picked up at the end of training camp. Then he re-aggravated that in week 1, but we've really seen him come on over the last few games. He had a season high 86% route participation rate. That's absolutely elite for a tight end, especially a young player like this that went early in the second round to the Jets. Yeah, he gave you 1.2 fantasy points against the Broncos, but really the whole Jets offense dudded. When you have a quarterback that throws for under 50 yards, it's going to be really hard for anyone on the offense to get much going. So I still have Taylor as a borderline tight end 1 the rest of the way, which is where the utilization score puts him, even taking into account his fantasy dud from this past week. So Mason Taylor on the rise. On the flip side, we have Juwan Johnson. Juwan Jesus, Ian, unfortunately, the moniker is not working for us right now. His utilization score has cratered from a 90 to a 73 over the last 4 games. And really, what's interesting about this is it's one of these deals where it's not like one player directly impacting Juwan Johnson. It's an indirect impact. It's Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller has upped his workload on the ground, and he's taking away from Alvin Kamara, a player that the community loves, a player that the coaches love, a player that the team loves, and they want to keep him. They don't even want to trade him, apparently. And because he's losing those carries on the ground, I think that's why they've just decided Alvin Kamara is a really good receiver out of the backfield, and we're going to use him that way. So Kamara had a 69% rush share and a 9% target share over the first 3 games. Nice. Over the last 3 contests, that has flipped to 41% of the rush share, right? Dropping from 69, but he's got a 20% target share. And so that's coming from Juwan Johnson. They're operating in the same area of the field. And this is a conundrum we see quite often for low ADOT tight ends. They get into conflict with their running back. And we could have talked about that earlier with Tucker Kraft. Look at what's happened with Josh Jacobs over the last 3 weeks and how involved he's been in the pass game. And who has that come away from? Tucker Kraft. When you look at the way some of these route combos and stuff are set up all over the field, they're only reading one side of the field often, or they're only getting to their second read. Most quarterbacks don't get to their third read. We talk about first and second reads. First reads, that's over 70% of dropbacks. It can be up to 80% for some quarterbacks. So what's happening is we're having that first read go to Kamara instead of Juwan Johnson. And if they do get to the second read, that's going to Kamara instead of Juwan Johnson. So if you look at his utilization score, it's still in a range where Juwan could end up being okay, but there's also just a little wrinkle here, Ian, if we saw a little bit more work for Taysom Hill in the pass game this last week. And historically, Johnson's never been a guy that's been in these 90, 85% route participations we saw early in the year. So I think there's still some added risk that like these numbers could go down more. But the big thing right now is Kamara. His target share for Johnson's target shares dropped from 24 to 11% across those same samples that we talked about for Kamara. So he downgrades to mid-range tight end 2 territory. I hate to bring this news to you guys. We were loving the Juwan Johnson breakout, but it has hit a wall.
11, 9, and 8 targets in the first 3 weeks, just 9 total targets over the past 3. So Juwan Judas, Dwain, unfortunately not doing us any favors recently. But hey, make sure. Yeah, not great, man. Not
Juwan
great.
Judas,
so,
that's a
hey
good
guys,
one.
Let's go ahead and move on to the fourth quarter. We got some waiver wire talk. Thank you. We already talked about one Giants rookie stud, if you will. Now time for the other one, Dwain. Jackson Dart doing his running the football thing that we knew we had in him. Didn't exactly know how great it would be, though. Talk about the prolific Giants QB1, and if you are ready to call him the same in Fantasyland.
Yeah, man. Over his 3 games as the starter, Dart leads all quarterbacks with 4.7 design rushing attempts. You know what that's a sign for, guys? For fantasy production. Over that span, he also ranks second in scrambles per game at 4.3. And so when you're running that much, Ian, we've talked about it many, many times and talking about preseason talk, talking about putting rankings together for the preseason. And we've looked at guys like this in the past. It's just so hard for them to fail. And right now, he's only averaging 169 yards passing per game. It's bumped up a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but at the same time, 55.7 rushing yards per game and 0.67 TDs per game on the ground. So he's averaging 19.7 fantasy points per game, despite throwing for only 169 yards per game. So yes, Jackson Dart does upgrade to borderline quarterback 1 territory, which is where we immediately put him when we knew we had Malik Neighbors and the potential for this rushing upside. Still available in 68% of Yahoo leagues. I also did the rest of season projections on Dart today, and he came out right in that same range. He was the QB 13 overall, which is where we had him when we first did the numbers, and then he fell down to 16, but he's back to 13, Ian, because man, just running the ball so much, it's hard to not score the fantasy points.
Have him just outside my top 12 this week in the very tough matchup against the Denver Broncos and Mile High, but certainly could see him cracking that top 12 sooner rather than later. On to some running backs, though, Dwain. Who is topping your list on the old waiver wire?
Yeah, so we already talked about Kamani Vidal, so he's available, guys, in 70% of leagues. He's the top of this list, but we're going to have to go to a gross place, and we're going to go to the Tennessee Titans, who have now moved on from their head coach, from their offensive line coach. We have Mike McCoy stepping in as the interim head coach, and the name here is Tyjae Spears. And Spears, I get it, guys. It's a despicable offense, but he took the lead in the passing down work in week 6. If we talk about a team that we don't think is very good, what do they do a lot? They trail a lot. And what we saw for Spears in this last game was a 46% snap share, a 60% snap share and a 64% route participation. If you look at the Titans on the year, Ian, they trail by 9 or more points on 46% of their snaps. Almost half of their snaps, guys, they're trailing by 9+ points in a game. And that's going to lead to the passing down back being on the field. And as an example, last week, I don't think I've ever seen anything this large. He was on the field for the 2-minute offense for 22 snaps that Tyjae Spears played. So Spears does move into RB4 territory. He's available in 76% of leagues. And then we have to look at the Cardinals backfield as well here. And we had the shakeup that we talked about a little bit earlier whenever we were talking about the 1-week sample for Kamani Vidal. And Bam Knight really took the lead role here. The snaps were still pretty close, 49% to Knight, 46% to Michael Carter. But it was Knight looking like the lead early down back. He actually handled more of the rushing attempts than Carter. Carter got some of the passing down workload, but right now, moving forward, have to project this more as Bam Knight leading the way on early downs with Michael Carter mixing in on pass downs. And then the final name we have here for running back, Ian, we go to the Cowboys, where we have Miles Sanders now out for the season, and we have a heavy workload on Javonte Williams. You have Hunter Lipke having to pitch in right now as the fullback, and it's Jaden Blue. So Jaden Blue is now the primary handcuff to Javonte Williams. If you guys listen to Thor Nystrom, he would just tell you, no, no, no. And then, guys, he would text you again and say, no, no, no. And then he would send a carrier pigeon. And all it would say that would be wrapped around the carrier pigeon's leg is no, no, no. So if you guys are a believer in Thor, you should not touch Jaden Blue. But we know this is a game of volume. And right now, Ian, if something happened, knock on wood, we don't want it to. But if Javonte Williams went down, we would be projecting Jaden Blue to get most of the work. We don't know for sure what it would look like. They haven't given him a lot of workload, but he's the clear running back too on an offense that we really like. So I think you can do worse than Jaden Blue in some of these really deep leagues where he's been cut. I actually saw him in some sicko leagues available last week, Ian. We put in some bids. We got him a couple of times. So in some of the smaller leagues, he's almost certainly going to be there. As of this morning, 83% of the time on Yahoo, Jaden Blue was still available.
Blue, one of the top running backs available. Like Dwain said, in over 80% of ESPN and Yahoo leagues. We'd also throw Blake Corum, Ollie Gordon, and Ray Davis, as well as Isaiah Davis and his other guys in those skank leagues, as Dwain loves to call them. That, again, if you are trying to just fill out those extra few bench spots, maybe they could float your boat. Moving on, though, Dwain, I want to talk about some wide receiver waiver targeted, and I should say headlined by a big booty over in New England.
Yeah, a big booty scoring touchdowns is what he's doing. So he did get an upgrade in the rest of season projections, but don't buy into the 26.3 fantasy points in week 6 against the Saints, guys. Yes, Drake May is playing out of his mind, but we have Kayshon Boutte still with a 14% targets per route run on the season, right in line with where he's been on his career. So you're going to need the big plays. It's going to be really hard to predict when they're going to come. Yes, we should see more of them. That's the biggest way he moved up the rest of season projections. I upped his touchdowns. Didn't really up his targets because his routes haven't improved. He's only playing 65% route participation over the last few games, so they have a kind of a gross rotation going on right now for New England. So Boutte's a boom bust wide receiver 5, Ian. He's available in 90% of leagues, but don't go crazy with your fab. Don't even know that I would put him at the top of the list, which, hey, Dwain, you idiot. How about you not put him at the top of the list in the utilization report when you write it up? That's a good recommendation from you guys. But Kendrick Bourne is the second name, Ian. And this was kind of tricky too, because Juwan Jennings apparently playing with 5 broken ribs, a high ankle sprain, and a low ankle sprain. So Juwan Jennings is hurting all over, and Kendrick Bourne has balled out the last 2 games with 24.2 and 19.2 fantasy points. Those numbers, guys, we get it. They're not likely to hold up for the season. We could get Ricky Pearsall back this week, trending towards having George Kittle. I would lean towards that's being a yes. I'm going to have him in my projections to start the week. So it's going to get a little bit more crowded. Obviously, they love CMC there. So these numbers are going to come down, but we've got a delay on Ayuk. We've got Jennings dealing with these injuries. If he's not really ready to go, we could see Kendrick Bourne still for a few more weeks, Ian, as the wide receiver 2 on the field with Juwan Jennings, even once he's back, and an offense that suddenly decided they're going to throw the ball 68% of the time. The 49ers have one of the best dropback rates over expected as far as if you want for your passing game this year. And that's even been with a backup in Mac Jones. The only thing I'll add here with Jones is Jones did have a mini stint before with Kendrick Bourne where they kind of got on a heater as well. So that's going to be the other part. We probably get Brock Purdy back. Can't say for sure this week, but it does seem like it's trending towards having Purdy back. That's the way betting markets are treating him early in the week. So Kendrick Bourne would be a name that's available 65% of the time in leagues, guys.
313 passing yards per game for Mac Jones this season, Dwain. Absolutely bonkers numbers. And yeah, the volume's been there as well, but kudos to, again, Mac Jones for, I'm sure, making himself a lot of future money as either a backup or maybe even a spot starter here in the future. Let's close things out with a look at the tight end position. And let's just say, guys, the headliner is going to be a bit contingent on Dave Njoku's knee injury, but God forbid we do see Harold Fanning get the full runway, Dwain. I promise you I will find a way to get him inside my top 10 for week 7.
Yeah, and one final one on the wide receiver, guys. If you're just looking for something to stash and you potentially get the bye week bump, it would be Jaden Higgins, their 2nd round pick. So he's available in almost 90% of leagues. But at the tight end position, you mentioned it with David Njoku. Right now, as of recording this, he's listed as day-to-day. Earlier, we heard it sound like he was going to miss more time. So it's really up in the air. We've got some conflicting reports here around Njoku. So we'll have to see what the rest of this week brings. But Fannin last week recorded a season-high utilization score of 90 with Njoku leaving the game. And also, it's a player, Ian, that they've really liked to use all over the formation. He lines up at fullback. He lines up at H-back. They line him up at tight end. They put him in the slot. He's a guy that was a very prolific receiver in college, and they're also not shy to put him out there on rundowns as well, which is the big thing that most people said Fannin would really struggle with, and he's been fine in that capacity. So should David Njoku miss time? Yes, Ian, we would have Fannin as a borderline tight end 1. The only reason he wouldn't go higher is we're still dealing with a passing offense that's honestly on a week-to-week basis hard to project for more than like 175 yards per game, depending on the matchup that they have. So that's a little bit of an issue. But then the other name that I want to highlight here, and if you're not looking for a short-term fix and you're just looking for a stash for the long-term on your roster at tight end, it's Oronde Gadsden. And we started talking about him earlier, Ian, but if you look at his route participation over the last 4 games, 28%, 50%, 61%, and 77%. I just went ahead and bumped him to 69%. Sounds like a good number to me for the rest of the season. Nice. Tyler Conklin was available in this game. He was active. He just didn't play. He had 0% of the snaps. And we had Will Dissly, who had been out with injury, who was really their starting tight end, and he only played a limited role as well. Now, he was coming back from injury, so that's why I didn't take it all the way up to where Gadsden was this last week, Ian. But man, this guy is a very good player when you watch him on film. Like he's you said it on the Sunday night show. He's more along the ilk of being a wide receiver than a tight end. So Gadsden upgrades to borderline tight end 1 territory. I did the rest of season projections on him today. Once I put it all in, he was more of a mid-range tight end 1, but the upside, guys, is here. Like he could be right there in this borderline tight end 1 conversation the rest of the way. He's available 99% of the time.
Love seeing that. I think he meant Dwain mid-range tight end 2 for rest of season projections.
Yeah, rest of season projections, mid-range tight end 2, but I have him ranked, the utilization score puts him at a borderline tight end 1.
Cool. Just wanted to make sure there. But yeah, again, long-term play, guys, definitely Gadsden. If you just need someone for this week, we also have Kate Otten and Michael Mayer contingent on Brock Bowers, likely missing this one. They will be ranked ahead of Gadsden for this week only. But again, love that shout out there for the rest of the season. So as always, make sure you check out all the utilization tools and the very much free utilization report over at fantasylife.com. And we appreciate you guys tuning in as always. So I had a few technical difficulties on my end visually in the back half. So thank you, Mr. Dwain, for taking over and being the rock star that you are. But otherwise, guys, hope you liked the show. If you did and like the show, always appreciate hitting that subscribe button as well. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.